Okay, listen up because I'm about to tell you the single most important piece of advice I usually give people who tell me that they want to be in the sound department in the motion picture industry. You ready? Are you listening? Here we go. I'm going to say it a third time. Listen. Now, wait a minute. Don't just click the video and click away from it and say, okay, I'm going to watch something else. I want you to stay with me for a minute, okay? Notice I didn't say hear, because to hear simply means to engage your ears. It's kind of hard not to hear as long as you have hearing, right? Even if I'm tuning something out, if I'm reading a book at an airport or something like that, and I'm just tuning out the outside world, that's all outside my, conscious. I'm not paying attention to it. But I will pay attention when I suddenly hear something that stimulates my brain, like the plane is boarding. I'm going to notice that. Or to give you a set from example from set, I'll say, pictures up, let's roll sound. That's something that's going to get my attention if I happen to be idling because it's 18 hours into my day and I'm brain dead. But when I say listen, I mean you are hearing and paying attention to. And I don't just mean thinking about, okay, sound, 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 sound. I mean you are actually listening and deeply thinking about it and engaging your brain and your other senses. Here's what I mean about that. If I am on set and suddenly someone walks in with the new lighting instrument that I haven't seen before, I direct my attention to that because electronics make noise. Electronics can have fans, especially if they have a very bright bulb on it and it could have a cooling mechanism built into it. I mean, these things are like 18,000 watts sometimes. 20,000 watts. These are very high power instruments and they produce a lot of light. What does a lot of light mean? It means a lot. Well, it could mean a lot of heat. I mean, LED technology has gotten better and it's not quite as hot as it used to be. I mean, you could fry an egg on some lights that we use on set, but not necessarily LEDs. But LEDs do let out a very high-pitched tone sometimes. Tungsten, halogen lights, these lights can sometimes have a filament that rings and you hear it kind of jingling around on the inside there. And sometimes you might need to tell an electrician, can you rap on the side of the thing and disrupt the filament so it stops being so excited and settles down. But by listening, you're going to hear this kind of thing. To go back to my example, if I am listening on set and someone comes out with a new lighting instrument, I'm going to direct my attention to that because it could have a fan on it. If it has any kind of a screen on there, like any kind of a digital readout or something like that, there is almost surefire a computer chip or something like that built into it. Therefore, it is going to most likely be cooling and have a cooling mechanism built into it as well. So you direct your attention to that, and then as the electricians turn it on, stick your ear right up to the thing and say, hold on a second, let me listen to this. Hey, does this have a low fan sound that we can turn this to? If it continues to be an issue over the course of time, whatever the lighting instrument may be, if it doesn't have a dial you can turn off, then you can talk to the DP about that. Now, granted, you want to probably talk to your sound mixer first because your sound mixer may want to get involved, but you would definitely approach the gaffer and say, is there anything we can do about these fans? If they say no, then it may be a conversation your sound mixer might need to have with the DP regarding specifically, can you use another instrument to do that same job? Is there anything else we can use other than this instrument with this noisy fan on it? Because, if your boom pole had a light or a laser guidance system on there with like a laser pointer that shows you exactly where you're on axis, DPs wouldn't like that, would they? No, but they can go ahead and put down whatever in the world they want to with fans, and it's going to drive you nuts. It's just going to be something you hear. But the reason why post people or I shouldn't say post, let me go into producers actually. Producers are going to side with the DP first because they are in charge of the look of the show. They're already insurance bonded. They are basically in charge. If you're not familiar with a DP is in charge of the lighting and the camera department. So they're in charge of set lighting and setting the right camera angles. They're part of the prep process with the director. They work with the first AD to make sure that, they have a good time frame idea, how long the lighting setup is going to take or whatever the case may be. But the DP themselves are in charge of a lot. Picture costs a lot more to fix than sound does. So a lot of producers are going to say, I don't care. I just, ADR is only $250 an hour. We already have the actors. I'm not concerned with that. But if you think about it, being on set on an average show that might cost maybe $6 or $8 million per episode, or maybe let's just go $3 million, like some of the shows like on OWN and, MTV. A $3 million budget for an episode might mean that you have a 7 or 8 day shooting schedule. But when you think about that right there, taken into a per second cost, could be $60 or $80 per second. Well, if a sound delay is going to cost more than a few seconds, they're going to say, I'm not worried about it. Let's just go. We're going to bring our actors in. They'll ADR it. That's most likely what's going to happen if you're not on your game. Now, to be on your game, that also means listening. I keep saying this all the time. And it's really funny. A side note about listening. How many times, boom operators watching this, how many times do you have someone that comes up and whispers something in your ear and you're like, I can't hear you. My ear is 15 feet out. So you have to do one of these numbers and turn your ear straight towards them. Now, that's just because they don't realize that you are actually listening out there. Your single ear, I should say, is out there. If you are single ear on your boom, then both these ears are tuned into one input. That means it is a mono signal. That means it is sometimes hard to differentiate which direction and tell which direction a sound is coming from. That's one of the reasons why I usually recommend people stay on set. If you're a boom operator, live on set. Only get off set when someone says, hey, can we get a few minutes here? Because we got to bring in a lot of heavy gear, or we got to bring out all these file cabinets, a lot of lighting instruments coming in. Can we just clear the set for a few minutes? That's when you step off set, being cordial, you step off set, maybe watch from the monitors, or you step off set and maybe peek in there every couple of minutes to make sure they're not doing anything crazy with regards to their lighting, or going to light you out or something like that. But by listening, when you're on set, you're going to dial in on things that you would not normally be able to hear. Any electronics on set can make a sound. Cameras, for example. The red camera is one of the most noisy things you will ever hear if you're a boom operator. And that's because the fan on there is basically it sounds like a hairdryer. Just being completely honest, it sounds like a hairdryer. And of course, what do? They keep putting noisier fans on there because they keep taking their resolution up to now they're up to 8K at the time of this video. So 8K video means a lot of data is going very fast. What else happens when data moves fast? There's a heat process. It requires a computer. A lot of heat goes through there, so it requires cooling. And those fans are noisy. And of course, then what does the camera department do to the camera? They choke it out by putting all these, the cheese plate on there, and they put Velcro all over the thing and basically just smothers it. And so it even gets hotter. Now, I'm throwing Red under the bus here because they deserve it, to be completely honest. They should have developed a camera that doesn't need to be noisy on set and doesn't overheat simply by running. However, that's not saying it's the only noisy camera out there. Now, these noisy cameras are not it's not just the camera alone. Sometimes the monitor itself that the focus puller is using on the side of the monitor, on the side of the camera, could have a fan built into that as well. Sometimes it's as simple as dialing down the motor to a minimum speed because it doesn't really overheat that much. And if it's been on for a while and you realize there's a fan on there and you put your hand up to there, chances are you can say, this isn't really overheating, is it? Can we try turning down the fan? I don't think it's really going to hurt anything. Can we try it? Chances are, if you have some good rapport with the first ACs on set, they won't have a problem with that. Now, any other instruments on set, anything else that's electronic can make a sound. If you have a TV running, obviously, in the set, noisy setup that you're in, you could have a volume on and there could be sound on there. And even if the sound is up, but they're not, but you have a video playback guy and he's playing something through, even if he's not routing sound, if that television is up, the speaker could be buzzing. Might want to check that. If you're on set and you see speakers, let's just say you're in a nightclub scene and they're not going to be obviously using those nightclub speakers because you're going to have a sound playback guy bringing in their own for that. So you want to verify that the amps are not turned on to those speakers. There's another thing. On the note about nightclubs, intelligent lights, they're going to make noise. Unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about that. They sound terrible. And you can't choke them out by jamming something in the fan either. They don't like that, short out a $15,000 light. And that's just one of many lights. You can short them all out. Anyway, you don't have the luxury of controlling all the sounds on a set. Sometimes they are completely out of control, and one will lead to another, and sometimes they just picked a bad location. I mean, that's a very common thing, picking a bad location. And if you were working in the world of television, you don't have the luxury of going on a tech scout. Here's what a tech scout is if you're not familiar with it. A tech scout is when they write a movie and they're choosing locations. The location department takes the department heads, the director, the first AD, certain key people out there to say, this is where we're going to be shooting. Isn't this a great facility? Let's talk about how we're going to do things here. The lighting, they're going to go over there and say, well, we're going to light from here. They're going to do this and we're going to do this. All these bulbs need to change out to 3200 degree, something. They're going to say, okay, we're going to do something else here. We might need to put a wall spreader in. They're going to start ordering all these different things around. At that point, you need to be listening, amongst other things. I mean, you might want to do a Wi-Fi scan, or not a Wi-Fi. Jeez. You'd think I'm a sound mixer thinking like that. You might need to do a wireless microphone frequency scan. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. The actual thing that you want to pay the most attention to is the sound you hear, because the other stuff is stuff that could change by the day you go to there to shoot. But listening right there, of course, yeah, that can change too. But by listening, you can address things now. Because if you are, let's just say you're shooting at a bar, that's a common location, a restaurant, a bar, something like that. You're going to go to the panel, the breaker box, and you're going to start flipping switches. Now, an electrician that's going to be there, most likely the gaffer, maybe their best boy, is going to work with them too. Now, if they have a lighting gag going on, they could end up using an outlet right there on the bar. And if you are not there flipping switches and say, well, this bar, I can't pull these coolers out. If I can't pull them out, the fans are going to be on. They're going to be very, very noisy. I need to kill these things, so I need to flip a breaker. Well, if you flip a breaker and they've already pre-rigged that light for something on the shooting day, they say, well, I can't get in there and change this whole thing. I can't reroute this, or they could at least. They might be able to. But I've been on shows where they say, no, we've actually rigged this whole entire thing with a rope light that goes up and down through here. It took us a good half an hour to do. We can't do that. Where were you on the tech scout? Well, I'm sound. I was not allowed to be on the tech scout. That's the honest truth of it. On television, you don't normally have that luxury. Now, if you are a sound mixer and you're listening to this, one thing you can get as part of your deal memo, and I do know sound mixers that do this now, they can say, well, I have been, taken advantage of too many times. I know the game. I want to reserve the right to send a utility, or send basically a sound utility, the friend of yours, to go out and do a tech scout for you. That way, the utility goes out there and listens to it. So there's a little piece of advice for you right there. If you're a sound mixer, send a utility out to tech scout the location. They might not say, well, I don't want to pay a sound mixer. Fine, send out a sound utility. Sound utility is going to do a good job. And you might even send out your sound utility so they're familiar with the job, familiar with the location, and then replace them for the day. That's also acceptable. But if you go out on location and you are there working with all the departments and you say, wait a second, now I hear a buzz over here. Can we get locations on this? Can this door be opened up on the day? Like, it could be behind a closed door and locked, and they say, well, we don't have access to that. Well, can we find out about this and make sure that noise is shut down? Then they can work on that. If you try to approach people about things on the shooting day, they're going to say, I have no control over that. Even if you're shooting in a convenience store, there are things you can do. A POS system, or the cashier system that they all type in everything, that's usually computer operated. And they usually put the computer right underneath where you're going to be shooting. And so you have this noisy fan, because chances are it's going to be a 15-year-old computer, and it's going to have this noisy fan on it. The whole thing is going to be dusty, and it's going to be making a weird warbling sound because there's so much dust inside the computer. Whatever the case may be, if you talk to them ahead of time, they can maybe move that computer. If you try to get it done on the day, they may say, I can't really shut that down. If you get advance notice to them, you can say, that needs to move. We can't do that. Then they can maybe shut it down. Another thing about that, when you step into a gas station, or let's go with the convenience store, you have all those back the full size refrigerating coolers, the Hussmann units or whatever they happen to be in the back, that just have all the drinks and everything in there. They need to have access to those for the show, right? You need to see that everything's lit up in there, because that's product in there. If you kill those, Well, some units, I should say, you can kill just the refrigeration part of it. Some of it, you kill the light and the refrigeration. So if you address it early enough, then the electricians can rig lights to it so that way you can kill the coolers, and that way you still have the lighting effect, but you're not overwhelming them with an hour's worth of work to do on the day of the shoot, because they're already going to be pre-lighting everything anyway. Another thing about that is if they say, well, we can't take the whole system down without actually taking down not just the light, but the coolers themselves, they have product in there. We can't let it expire. We have a solution for that as well. By getting advance notice to the facility, you can say, well, let's get a whole bunch of dry ice and we'll put it in there behind the product. That way it'll keep the coolers nice and cool. You can kill the power to them and you have a much better sound. By getting into the tech scout, by going on the tech scout, there's all these little tips and tricks that we can get and to use to get things done. But we need to be part of those tech scouts, and that involves listening. You're not going to hear this stuff unless you engage your ears. You need to hear that there's a vibration rumble in the background, and you need to go over there and address it. Something's rumbling on the roof. What's going on? Where is that sound coming from? Oh, there's a vent right there. Well, can we kill the house air for a second? Kill the air handlers, kill the air conditioning? I still hear that. Well, that's because actually you come to find out by talking to locations, they talk to the owner and they say, oh yeah, well that's a vent that actually goes to the roof. That's something that's part. But by getting them a notice up in advance, what they could do is baffle it on the outside. They could baffle it and keep all the sound from coming in. So there's something else that listening is going to do. Now, this is all Tech Scout related. Now, I've kind of gotten on a sidetrack there, but this is key important information. By getting advanced access to your locations, you're going to be able to address this kind of thing. But what do you do if you have no Tech Scout, like you're on a television show? Well, first of all, if you're on a television show and you first get access to it, you want to get a pre-call. A pre-call is going to get you in there before everybody else comes to work, and that way you can start shutting down noises. As a boom operator, you want to get in there early while the utility is bringing carts in and whatever the case may be. You want to start killing breakers and label anything you kill. Sound has killed us. After you kill everything, make sure that you inform the electricians that you have what you have killed. And one of the things I always do is I bring in some Post-it notes and I just, cut off little slivers of make little flags right there. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll say sound needs 1, 3, 7, whatever. And I'll list them all because I'll kill it and I'll say, what shut off? Did it get quieter? If it got quieter, cool, leave it off. What? And then flip off the next one. It got quieter, cool. Flip off this one, no change, turn it back on. Flip this one off, no change, turn it back on. Over and over again. You kill all the breakers, and that way you can say, okay, what do we hear? It's gotten quiet now. As long as the site rep, who hopefully has been introduced to you by now by locations, the site rep is the person who is in charge of that facility. They're going to most likely going to be working with you because they're going to say, oh yeah, we're very much happy to have the film crew here and glad to work with you. If you kill something, they say, really can't do that. Okay, can't kill that refrigerator. Cool, no problem. Why is that? Is it something that we can move all the contents into another cooler? Usually they cannot kill the deep freeze in the very back. Well, sometimes there's also a refrigeration unit in the back they can't kill as well. Well, can you move everything, consolidate it all into one refrigerator unit? These are some things you can do on the day. Now, once you kill everything, inform your electric brothers. Because they need to be aware that you have put all the breakers you want to kill on the breaker box right there. You need to kill all those circuits. That way, if they need to plug something in, they can plug it in and you're not going to kill it. Now, the reason I say this is because once you kill everything and you've gotten the facility quiet, turn it all back on. Maybe not everything, but if it's coolers or something like that, definitely turn it back on. The reason you do that is because it is going to prevent the food from spoiling. And if you spoil the food, they're not going to be happy with you. That's another thing about killing refrigerators at houses. You want to make sure that you have a system in place for turning them back on. Because if the food spoils, production's probably going to have to buy about $400 worth of food for the homeowners. And of course, they're going to be a lot less interested in working with you on shutting down noises next time, because that will fall back on the locations department. So listening is key, and I won't just linger on this. You get the idea. If you have additional questions on what to do in certain circumstances, Write in the comments down below. But for right now, I'm gonna go ahead and sidestep into another aspect of this. And you need to also listen as you are reading the script. You're most likely reading the script of a movie, maybe even before you even choose to do that movie. You also are going to be reading the sides, on the day, but more importantly, you want to read the script ahead of time. By reading the script ahead of time, you're going to see where the locations are going to be. This is shooting at a waterfall. Great, we're going to have hog's hair there to quiet that down. This is shooting at a lake. We're going to need to prep on that too. This one here is going to be shooting in a casino. Well, geez, we're going to need to make sure we shut down all of those machines that we are not seeing. Or if we do see them, do they have a quiet mode? Sometimes this is as simple as dialing down a knob, but they need to know that in advance. And by reading the script, you can make notes of things that you are going to be hearing, or you think you're going to be hearing, and ask questions ahead of time. Whoever is in charge of that particular thing, if it's a prop, talk to the props department. If it's a location, talk to the locations, because they're going to be looking for locations with certain things. Address that ahead of time. The more advanced notice you can give, the better chance they're going to have of making that being able to work with you and making it as quiet as you deserve for your tracks. Another thing about reading the scripts, it allows you to realize you can, that you're going to be shooting on some locations, but you could also be building certain sets. If you are going to be building, if your show is going to be building certain sets, find out how they're being built up front. Try to maybe walk around on the set and investigate it and check it out. If you check it out early and you see that there's some stairs going into the basement, well, there's padding that can be put on those stairs. Can they put little unfinished, that foam kind of padding, something like that, to put that on there? If it's the wood look they're going for, they can coat it with a rubber. They can coat it with, and you will not see it. They can just, go in there and they paint it with a little rubber coating, and then go in there and add another coating on there. And that can help. That can really help, especially because you're not going to be able to put carpets down on those because, a stairwell goes like this up to the next floor and stomp, stomp, stomp. Now it's going to sound like garbage, but you can address it early enough. And as long as it's not been established, and by established, I mean the first time it is seen by the camera, it is established. That is where it is. If you get access to what they are building, start looking at it from a point of view of what is going to potentially make sound. By remembering what the script said, you're going to be able to piece that together and say, okay, well, wait a minute, there was supposed to be a bath someplace and they're draining water out. How's that drain going to work? Could we, build something to make sure that's done quietly because, it could be over your dialogue. Whatever the case may be. Another thing that when you read a script up in advance notice, it's going to tell you that your environment, you're going to be shooting in a bathroom. Or you're going to be shooting in this big metal building, like a refrigerator, let's say, a big walk-in cooler. If that's the case, it's going to be loud, a lot of reflective sounds. Well, even if you can shut off the noise, someone claps, it's going to be echoing all over the place. Well, if you show up there on the day and you're like, wow, this is going to suck, then obviously you can't exactly do anything about it. But if you know in advance what you can, that you're going to have issues there, what you can do is say, well, I want to take out some standing waves. So I want to put carpets down. I want maybe locations can even help you with that. Sometimes they call in a company that's responsible for putting down carpets at locations to preserve the ground. And then if they do have those, say, make friends with them, definitely, because they can put carpets all the way up to the edge of the frame and they will really help you and the sound utility out, and y'all will love them. But you can also put ferny pads up hanging on walls. That takes out a little bit. Now, granted, it's not that thick, but you can come in there with acoustic foam and jam it in the corners of the room. Think about when you're playing pool. If you play pool and you slam the cue ball with your eyes closed even, it's going to go off at some direction. Which pocket is it most likely going to go into? A side or a corner? Well, yes, there are twice as many corners as there is a side, but it's also a lot easier to go into a corner because things naturally gravitate towards the corners. A side pocket is along the side, and you have to catch it at just the right angle for it to go in. A corner pulls everything into it. It can come in at this angle, this angle, this angle, this angle. As long as it's somewhere over there, it's going to bounce off and maybe even bounce off again. A corner in a room does the same thing to sound. If you take your boom pole and you take your microphone in the upper corner of a room and just sit it in there, pointing it in toward the corner or pointing it out, you're going to realize it's a lot noisier than it is just a few feet away or standing against the wall, near it. The reason why is because sound does the exact same thing. It bounces all around the room. We basically have three different kinds of waves. You have standing waves that go between two surfaces. You have waves that go between four surfaces, like wall, ceiling, wall, floor, wall, over and over again. And then you have the waves that go in every single direction. The back and forth waves and the four corner waves, those are a lot less common than the waves that go all over the place. And as long as you put some sort of acoustic padding in the corners of the room, you're going to take the curse off of that room. Simply because a lot of that sound is going to be echoing in there, and once it hits a corner, it's going to go in all kinds of crazy directions. But if you put something in that corner, it's going to take the curse off of it. Put carpet on the ground, put something up in the corners, in the four corners of the room. You're going to be very surprised at how much that reduces the echo and the reflections in that room just by doing that. Obviously, you want to do it if you do not see that area on camera. If you're in a bathroom, for example, you're going to have all kinds of reflections. But, in a bathroom, there's going to be corners that you don't see. Put them up there. Make sure that any walls that you can get access to, you put a Fernie pad on at the very least, maybe some acoustic padding if you have it. If you get advance notice by reading the script and then working with the right departments, you can even have perhaps the grips to make them aware that you're going to ask them for some stands with a couple of gobo arms coming out when you're going to hang Fernie pads from them so you can move them around set. By getting advance notice, you can also ask the DP, do you want the white or the black side facing out? They may want the bounce. They could want the negative fill. These are a few things to keep in mind. But that's just regarding the script itself. Look with your ears. Listen as you're reading it. What are you going to run into? Anything that's in bold is going to potentially make a sound. It's going to be a prop that's introduced. It's going to be a location, a person. Person could be entering. A door could be closing. Those all make sounds. You probably know tricks for them. Be on top of them. Another thing to keep in mind about investigating sets, especially the ones that are being built, is that they're not final yet. You can't just look at it and say, okay, well, it's going pretty well. All right, I'm going to trust in it to be done. Investigate it later, especially if you try to say, well, can you help us by maybe putting carpet at least in this part? Well, we do have carpet. We can maybe throw that in there. Now, if they say, no, we want the hardwood floor look or whatever else, well, there's rubber that looks like, hardwood floor. Can you use that? Maybe if you get advance notice to them far enough in advance, they could do that. That could take the curse off of everything, especially, footsteps if you're using high heels or something like that. Those are a couple of things that you want to keep in mind. So noise sources in general are electronic based. They are location based from like hollow, bad locations. It could just be any one of a bunch of things. And you're not going to hear these things unless you listen. Another thing about listening that is very, very critical as a boom operator is anything you point that microphone at. You know the polar pattern of that microphone, whether it's a cardioid, a supercardioid, hypercardioid, whatever the case may be, that microphone has a pattern. And it basically is listening in a particular direction based on according to the pattern. Now, the pattern, what it's called means nothing. The pattern could be called a cardioid, but it could be sound more like a supercardioid that you're familiar with. Or it could say it's a hypercardioid, but it sounds more like a cardioid to you. That name is just a general idea of the way something sounds. You need to listen to the microphone. Whenever I get a microphone, for example, and play with it for the first time, I point it at my mouth. And then I slowly start to go off axis and turn it a little bit off axis, and I'm listening to see at what point my voice is going to start attenuating. At what point do the highs start to go away? My lows, the bass in my voice, the limited bass, I should say, is going to always find the microphone. But the highs are more directional. So as soon as I go off axis to a certain point, that microphone is not going to be picking me up as well. The edge of that microphone is going to be something that I'm going to want to know where that is so that I can play that pattern the way I want it to. There's a null spot on every microphone. You might have seen me talk about these things, off axis in a video, null spots in a video, but these are things that are very important things to know about a microphone. You want to play the pattern of that microphone in certain, so that way the pattern is focused on the person you find most important or the noise source that you find most important, and anything that's loud and noisy on set that you can't shut down, you want to put in the null area. That microphone is something you need to know the way it sounds, and you need to constantly be listening to it. If I go closer to a wall, or I'm sitting at a table and I suddenly lean forward on the table, that is a hard surface. All the hard surfaces do is reflect, and they are most likely going to reflect the low end, the bass part of my voice. If I lean on a table, my chest cavity, where all the bass comes from, is leaning right on that table. And so my chest is going to be vibrating on the table, my voice is over that, and all that does is when you put a microphone on there, it hears my voice, then it bounces off the table and comes back up and hears it again. That's one of the reasons why you want to listen and always have headphones on when you boom, because you will not necessarily boom straight up and down. You might need to add a bit of an angle to get off that table so you don't hear as much of that reflected bass. But by listening, you're going to hear if you start to go off axis, because you obviously can't turn the microphone upwards or something like that, because then you do not have the ability to hear the highs as well as the lows. By listening and playing the pattern of that microphone, you're going to really dial in on the important parts. Now, if I do a scene and I'm, or the actors, let's say, and not me because, I don't act. If they're crying their soul out into a door, obviously it can sound like a door. But perhaps it would sound better if you came straight at them. Like if their face is against the wall at the door this way and the camera's over there that way, and you come up above and you just come straight in line with the door, not necessarily this way, maybe coming straight in line with the door, more in line with their face, that could be something different. Maybe if you came from underneath, it would sound better. Maybe you might have to, based on their angle, if they're facing straight into the wall, you may have to play not just to them, you may have to actually cue the microphone and play some of that reflectiveness off of the door in order to get that fidelity. It depends. You have to listen. By listening, you're going to be able to dial in on all these different things and more. Two people are talking and one person then overlaps, which means basically they are talking and then this person actually cuts off this person. They're supposed to be doing this number and then this person stops and then this person continues to talk, right? But sometimes this person will start talking before this person has stopped. And then all of a sudden you have two people talking like this, their vocals are overlapping. If there is a camera that's doing coverage on one of those people and their voices are overlapping, post cannot separate those voices. You need them clean. So make sure your ADs, director, whoever knows that they overlapped. You will not notice that unless you are listening. Saving the track, basically. If you are extremely wide and you're playing the lavs, and then you punch in for coverage and you're really, really close, and there's background noises from cars or whatever else, your mixer may not be able to play your boom even though it's right there because there's too much noise on it. A full-size microphone is going to be it's going to have a lot more reach, it's going to have a lot more fidelity, but it's also going to pull in a lot more of those frequencies that you may or may not be wanting to have there. Obviously the actors, you want to have them, but you could have, something that you can't shut down, and that's entering the microphone. By trying to play that null area, you can maybe reduce it, but once you are done with all that, your mixer may have to choose and say, well, I'm going to have to play the lav on this, because the noise is lower on there. Now, that is something that's their choice, not yours being a boom operator. My point here is, in all of this that I've been talking to you about for a while now, is it is so critical for you to listen, not just hear. You need to listen. You need to listen with your ears when you're on set, when you're part of a tech scout. You need to listen with your ears when you are reading the script. Yes, words. You still need to listen. You know how these things sound. You have a brain. You're an intelligent person. That's why you're in the sound department, right? You want to engage your brain and listen. That's when you're going to hear all these things. Electronics, reflections, noisy lights, all these kind of things, you're going to gain an experience, obviously. You may not hear them all because, if you saw my video on the pulvinar nuclei, you'll realize that your brain naturally does sensory gating. Watch the video, you'll learn. But your brain naturally is going to have to be trained to hear all those sounds because human nature is to ignore things that it does not find to be important. So you have to train your ear to hear all those sounds again. Now, granted, ignorance is bliss. And if you engage it all the time and you can't turn it off, it's going to make it very difficult for you to watch a movie because you're going, oh, yikes, that was a bad ADR line. Or why did they suddenly switch over to the lav on that? That sounded terrible. You need to listen. When you're on set, don't just go into idle mode. If you see something there, electronics, human-wise, I did a movie a few years ago, and there was Betty White in a scene where she was walking in with a tray full of china. They were drinking tea. Jennifer Love Hewitt was drinking some tea and stuff out of it with her, and they ended up, Betty, bless her heart, she was not able to hold the tray exactly steady without it making noise. So what I did is knowing that, and I saw that in rehearsal, so what I did is I took some Joe's sticky stuff, which you've heard me mention in another video, and I took that Joe's and I just stuck it all down. So I silenced it. The quieter you can get it, the lower the noise floor is going to be. And basically the way it works is you attack the thing that's the loudest first. Then once that's gone, what do you hear now? Going to attack the next thing and lower the noise floor again because you shut off something else. Attack the next thing. What is the next thing you hear? What is the next thing you hear? What is the next thing you hear? Until it's so quiet that your microphones are going to be picking up people breathing. That's going to be low down on the mix. Let me tell you, if you can hear people breathing on set, either that or they have a sinus issue or something. And in which case you can sometimes, they'll be willing to work with you and back away from set a little bit, which I've been on shows where we've asked people if they could remove themselves from set or back off, or do you have to be right on set? Do you have to be right under the actors? We hear you breathing. Of course, by then, if it's that quiet, if you've done your job that well and it's that quiet, their breathing could be distracting to the actors as well. Because the way that it works is the louder an environment is, let's say if the environment that you're shooting in is 80 dB, and the actors, not just the signal to noise ratio, but the actors themselves are talking, let's say at 90 dB, they're yelling over that. Well, let's bring it back down. Let's say 70 dB and the actors are being kind of loud and animated at 85 dB. That 15 dB of leverage that the voice falls into is going to give post a lot less to deal with than if you can get ITC and shut down all traffic on the road. ITC, intermittent traffic control, intermittent traffic control, ITC, basically shutting down traffic. Police officers hold traffic and whatever else. And by the way, make sure that if your police officers are holding traffic, if they hold a truck or something that's really loud, ask them to go over and do this number. Can you kill your engine? Sometimes having a location person nearby that once a police officer stops, say, hey, can you kill your engine, please? If they're really noisy, they can do that. And I mean, that's because if they're stopping traffic right behind set, then obviously you're going to hear a car idling, and it'd be nice to have that shut down. So by having the forethought enough to shut that down, that's going to be great. But this all comes, from just having experience and being on set and then identifying certain sounds and knowing how to deal with them. But if you can reduce that noise floor, it's going to make your the sound at the same volume, it's going to make it sound better. It's going to be like, if the actors are talking at like 70 dB and your noise floor is now at 40 dB, that 30 dB of leverage is going to be a lot better than having it like at 60 dB. Plus, constant sounds are better than, oscillating sounds or sounds that are not constant. If you just have a background generator like that, that's something that post can deal with a lot better than if it's going something like that. It's a lot more difficult for post to deal with. They're going to say, you know what, fine, we're just going to ADR this. listen, shut down noises. I don't know how many times I could say it. I know you're probably bored with hearing this. And if you're still listening to this video, I appreciate it because I know I can be long-winded, but occasionally I'll put out something else that's another tidbit of knowledge there. It is so critical. That's why I'm really nailing this video so much and really just dialing it in there, because listening is so critical and important. Everything you do on that film set as a boom operator involves listening. Everything. So keep that in mind, because that is the single most important thing, in my opinion at least, that you need to do if you want to be a boom operator, is you have to listen. Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.